What would you do if you walked into a forest and discovered a village that had been missing for 100 years? And what if the people there were waiting for you? Nobody in the nearby towns dared to enter the old forest after sunset. They said the trees whispered names, and the wind carried voices of people who had been dead for generations. Most people laughed at the stories, but a young writer named Daniel could never forget them. One chilly autumn evening, he packed a lantern and a notebook and followed the narrow trail leading into the forest. He wanted to find the truth behind the legend of the lost village. As he walked deeper into the woods, the trees became taller and the air grew strangely cold. Even the birds had stopped singing. Then he noticed something unusual. A warm light flickered between the trees. Daniel pushed aside a curtain of vines and suddenly stopped. An entire village stood before him. Small wooden houses lined a stone road. A well rested in the center of the square, and smoke rose from several chimneys. According to every map, this place did not exist. A church bell rang in the distance. Then a door slowly opened. An old woman stepped outside and looked directly at him. "You are late," she said calmly. Daniel swallowed hard. "Late for what?" "For the festival," she replied. Before he could answer, more villagers appeared. Men, women, and children surrounded him with warm smiles, as though they had been expecting his arrival. The old woman introduced herself as Martha, the village elder. She invited him to the square where tables overflowed with bread, fruit, and steaming soup. Everything looked normal, yet something felt terribly wrong. There were no electric lights, no phones. The villagers wore clothes from another century. Daniel finally asked the question that had been troubling him. "What year is this?" The smiles disappeared. The entire square became silent. At last, Martha answered in a soft voice. "It is 1926. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. "No," he said slowly. "The year is 2026. The villagers stared at him in horror. An old man dropped his cup. A child began to cry. Then Martha stepped closer and whispered words that made Daniel's blood turn cold. "If it is truly 2026, she said, "then we have been trapped in this forest for 100 years. A heavy silence fell over the square. Daniel could hardly breathe. Martha explained that 100 years earlier, during their harvest festival, a strange gray fog had rolled into the village. When the fog disappeared, every road leading out of the forest had vanished. Anyone who tried to leave returned to the same place before sunrise. Over the years, the villagers stopped trying to escape. Even stranger, time no longer worked normally there. Some people had grown old, while others looked exactly the same as they had decades earlier. It is as if the forest refuses to let us go," Martha said quietly. Suddenly, the church bell rang again. The villagers turned pale. "The fog is coming," whispered a young boy. A thick gray mist began moving through the streets like living smoke. It curled around the houses and slowly covered the square. Daniel felt a strange pull toward it. Martha quickly grabbed his hand. "Listen carefully," she said. "When the bell rings 3 times, the forest opens a path. Only one person can leave. Then come with me," Daniel said. She smiled sadly. "The path never opens for us." The bell rang a second time. The fog grew thicker. Then Daniel noticed something beside the old well. There was a stone covered with names. At the bottom was his own name, Daniel Carter. Under it was a date, October 12th, 2026. His hands began to shake. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Because every person who finds this village is meant to become part of it." The third bell echoed through the forest. At that moment, a narrow trail appeared between the trees, glowing with a pale golden light. "You still have a choice," Martha said. "Leave and tell our story, or stay and become one of us." Daniel looked at the frightened faces around him. He knew the world would never believe him, but if he stayed, the lost village would remain a secret forever. He tore the pages from his notebook and placed them beside the stone. "I promise," he said. "I will tell everyone that you are here." With one final glance, he ran toward the glowing path. The moment he crossed it, the fog disappeared. Morning sunlight warmed his face. Behind him stood only empty trees. No houses, no village, nothing. Years later, Daniel wrote a book called The Forest Old Village. People called it a work of fiction. But every autumn, he returns to the edge of the forest carrying a lantern. And sometimes, when the night is very still, He hears a distant church bell and the voices of a village that time could never erase.